This is WAFF 48 News, Decision 2024 election coverage, sponsored by Deep South Roofing.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back to 48 Now. It's digital host A.J. Wuest here, of course, again with Dr. Waymon E. Burke, the only guy to be with on election night. That is 100% for sure. We are finally getting some local numbers in. The U.S. House District 1 is currently Barry Moore is leading Tom Holmes, 72% of the vote. And we'll actually go down the line here in these U.S. House races, and then we'll get to even more local. And as you can see the map behind me, yeah, you know. It's behind me right there. We'll take a look at that map as well. But the District 2, Dr. Burke, Caroline Dobson currently leading. Shamari figures 55% of the vote. Shamari figures 44%. Now only 13% of the votes are counted. But Dr. Burke, what can you say about that U.S. House District 2 race?
Well, of course, that district came about because of a lawsuit about civil rights violations of representation of African Americans in the U.S. Congress from Alabama. And so the courts required the state to redraw the district to make it a more competitive district. It's probably, give or take, 50% black, 50% white. Many people, the Figures family down there, of which Shamari Figures is a part of, is a highly respected and well-known family known for their public service, and they've held all sorts of roles in the state. Many people believe that it's likely to go Democrat. We don't know yet. There's no certainties, of course, but that seat and, of course, the 7th District with Terry Sewell, who's been elected a number of times, are the only two Democratic, potentially, if this one goes Democratic, would be the only two Democratic congressional seats in the state.
Very interesting, that is for sure. And some of the other districts, a lot of the districts were uncontested. District 3, Mike Rogers, he was the only one running. District 4, Robert Aberholt, only one running. District 5, of course, that is our district, Dale Strong. But also there's District 6 with Gary Palmer and Elizabeth Anderson. Gary Palmer, the Republican in the race, he is leading the race 66%. Now, only 2% of these votes are currently counted. And then let's take a look at District 7, Terry Sewell and Robin Lideker. Terry Sewell is leading by a large margin right now. 12% of the votes have been counted. What can you say about Terry Sewell?
Well, Terry Sewell is, she's one of those people with a reputation for reaching across the aisle, trying to work with people on both sides of the aisle to get things done. That is her reputation. So it is, it's not surprising that how well she is doing. Like I said, it's likely at the end of the night that it'll either be 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat or 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. One of those 2 scenarios will be the reality.
Very interesting. And we are going to take a look at the Alabama, this is the presidential voting map. As you can see, the colors are starting to fill in that gray area there. Now, Trump has already been declared the winner here in the Yellowhammer State, but that is a map so that you guys can see that. But Dr. Burke, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Election Day. I know you were a history and political science teacher and professor for many years.
50 years.
For 50 years, that is absolutely insane. And there is a lot of knowledge there, absolutely. But really, why is Election Day, now maybe our viewers at home might know this, but why is Election Day always on a Tuesday? And also, why is the elections typically always in November?
Well, in the early days of our republic, most people were in agriculture and they did not live in urban centers and so forth. And often you had to go to an urban center, large or small, to be able to cast your vote. And of course, by putting it in November, that puts it past harvest time, which means a farmer would not have to give up crucial days in the fall to reap their harvest, which was, of course, their livelihood. A Tuesday, you know, a lot of people attend church on Sunday. Sometimes they have to travel to do that and so forth. So it was a day that was, you know, after harvest is over in most places and so forth. And so Tuesday is not a weekend. Many countries actually hold their elections on weekends. Now, we have in some states, you can actually vote early. You know, several states, some have a long period of several weeks of voting. Alabama is not one of those states. Alabama, under certain circumstances, you can get absentee ballots. I've done that before. It's sort of a hassle. But generally, if you don't do that, then if your vote is going to count, then you have to actually show up on a Tuesday and vote.
Yeah, very interesting there. And I want to discuss, obviously, President Trump he was elected, and then he lost the 2020 election, and now he is trying to become president again, obviously. There has been one other person in U.S. history, one other president in U.S. history that has been a split-term president, as you said. Can you speak on that a little bit? Because that was really interesting.
Interestingly enough, from 1861 until 1913, there was only one Democratic president. All the others were Republicans. And that was Grover Cleveland, who was first elected in 1884. In 1888, he actually won the most popular votes, but did not win the Electoral College. And Benjamin Harrison, grandson of President William Henry Harrison, who had been elected in 1840, so defeated him. It is said that Mrs. Cleveland said on the way out, "Don't change anything, we'll be back in 4 years." And sure enough, 4 years later in 1892, former President Grover Cleveland defeats the incumbent president, Benjamin Harrison.
Wow. That is crazy. And also speak on the Electoral College versus the popular vote. When was the Electoral College established, and for what reason was it established?
Well, the Electoral College is in the original Constitution, and some of the amendments have changed some things, but the Electoral College allots votes according to a state's population that may change every 10 years after the census. Some say it's to allow if the populace makes a grievous error that electors who may supposedly have superior knowledge would actually correct that problem. There's been 5 times in American history when the person who did not win the popular vote became president. The first time was 1824 when Andy Jackson, although no one had a majority in the Electoral College, Andy Jackson got the most popular votes. But ultimately, the House of Representatives, which is what the Constitution does when no one gets a majority of electoral votes, chose John Quincy Adams. The next time was in 1876. In 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes and his opponent were locked into a dead heat. As a matter of fact, there were Samuel Tilden, governor of New York, who was the Democrat, and 20 electoral votes, 19 of them in former Confederate states, and 1 in the state of Oregon, were contested. And in the end, there was a political compromise where that Hayes got all 20, which gave him the exact number he needed at the time to become president. And so when you're in the 4th grade remembering all the presidents, Samuel Tilden is not one of them. Another was 1888. I mentioned that a while ago, where President Cleveland was defeated. The next one was not until 2000, when George W. Bush prevailed. That went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a very controversial decision, stopped the vote counting in the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, Bush prevailed by 537 or 38 votes, but there was never actually a forensic voter recount statewide. And the last one was in 2016 when Hillary Clinton received the most popular votes but did not become president.
Very interesting. And now we are going to run through, thank you for all that, Dr. Burke. Truly, you are an encyclopedia of nothing but knowledge and filled with history, which I love. I am a huge history buff. That was my favorite subject, along with English. But I'm going to run down through some of the Madison County races. Tom Brandon currently leading. Libertarian Mark Jean, 75% of the vote. Steve Haraway, 74%. And Dr. Burke, feel free to cut me off anytime you want to.
Well, let me just say this. You mentioned the Libertarians earlier, and I'm not sure I answered that question about the rise of the Libertarians. I'm not sure how far they've risen. The Libertarians they've been around for a long time. They do not like government bureaucracy, government institutions, these types of things. While I guess they're not quite anarchists, they may be a sibling or a first cousin. But that is, libertarians say that they want to shrink government to the smallest possible entity that they could. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting philosophy, I guess. A lot of people would probably miss the parts of government they like.
Right, for sure. And certainly a lot of libertarians on the ballot here. Really, every Madison County Commission race has a libertarian and not a Democrat, which I found really interesting.
Well, let me say this. I don't know if that means they wouldn't pave the roads or not, and that's largely what commissioners do. They keep the roads paved.
Right, for sure.
So I tease my libertarian friends.
Right, for sure. Nothing like a good laugh every now and then, that is for sure. District 5, Phil Riddick leading Ollie Reese. We have District 6, Violet Edwards, a Democrat. She has defeated another Libertarian, Raphael Law. 87% of the vote there. We'll look at probate judge Frank Barger, the incumbent there. I just lost where I was, but yes, Frank Barger, the incumbent, 75% of that vote. We'll also look at Jackson County. Those votes have still not been counted, or the numbers aren't quite in yet, but we'll have more on that coming up. Madison County Chairman, Mac McCutcheon's running, Guy Sotomayor, and Alan Barksdale, all running in that race. Mac McCutcheon currently leads that race, but still the night is very young. Some of the local amendments, what can you say about that, Dr. Burke?
Are you talking about the amendment for Franklin County?
Yes.
And some about what to do
Jackson
with
County.
Surplus education property?
Yes, sir.
You know, probably 99% of the people who walk in the voting booth and say that says, "What? Why am I voting on? What in the world does it mean? What does it? Why do I care what's going on in Franklin County?" And I actually agree, which that's one of the faults of the Alabama Constitution of 1901 is that certain provisions must be voted on statewide rather than by the citizens of that county to determine what should be done. That's the reason the Alabama Constitution has, give or take, 1,000 amendments to it, is because the bulk of them are things like this that I think many reformers, including myself, have said, give me a break. That's something we should change. If the citizens of that county want that provision, it should be left to them. I should not make it for them. I'm editorializing a bit there, AJ.
Right. Nothing wrong with that. That is Incredible. Now I want to talk, before we let you guys go back to local news live. We'll go through the presidential election one more time. Donald Trump, the former president, currently has 188 electoral votes. Kamala Harris with 99. I am not sure where we're at as far as counting, but it is still very young, of course. States Trump has won, Alabama, of course, being one of them. Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, that was called very early. Kentucky also called early. Louisiana, Missouri, Mississippi, North Dakota, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas. That is a big one there. West Virginia and Wyoming. And then on the other side, Kamala Harris with Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. So still all these swing states, which of course will consist of Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan. Am I missing any, Dr. Burke?
I can't see the map, but everything you called off, nothing is a surprise to us at this point. And the western states, of course, have not come in, and a lot of states even east of the Mississippi, particularly the blue wall states that we talked about of Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, which are pivotal to both candidates in this race. And it's like Georgia. I know I believe, if I'm seeing the map correctly from this vantage point, that it appears to be pink as opposed to red. We don't know how it's going to go, but remember, 40+% of the vote is in those 9 counties of Atlanta and the suburbs. And my guess is that those votes have not come in yet. We must also remember that in Pennsylvania, that none of the early vote was counted before today. They could not start working on counting the absentee vote until today. And ever how that absentee vote goes will probably determine how Pennsylvania goes. But unfortunately, Pennsylvania, unlike other states that vote early, to my knowledge, every other state that votes early allows their folks to count those votes, tabulate them, not publish them until after the day of the election. That would be, say, the night of the election, when it doesn't influence the outcome. But it's probably going to take some time for Pennsylvania to actually get an accurate count. And if it comes down to Pennsylvania, we may not know absolutely sure until those votes are counted, whether it's 48 hours or 24 hours or 72 hours.
Right, absolutely. And still 42% of the votes are counted in Pennsylvania, of course. But interestingly enough, when you look at the state of Georgia, right now, Georgia leaning red, 80% of the votes are counted, the AP reports. So it seems like, I'm not sure if this was how it was in 2020. I can't quite remember, but it seemed like it was a little bit later on that the state of Georgia reached 80%.
I don't remember either. And of course, Georgia, a lot like Pennsylvania, it could go either way according to what the voter totals are. And it's a little bit difficult to measure, or to compare, I should say, the early vote, say 4 years ago and today in any state. One, we had the pandemic going on at the time, of course. We had another situation where then President Trump was criticizing the early voter process itself, and a lot of his supporters did not vote until Election Day, although interestingly enough, Trump himself voted absentee before it. The great ironies of history or of politics. And they've got unprecedented turnout in the early vote in these states. And we had talked, I think, a few days ago on the phone. I said maybe they are cannibalizing the Tuesday vote. And that is, one, you're probably going to, since Trump has said it's okay to vote early, we don't know how many of those early votes are Trump votes. And even if they are, does it cannibalize the vote that he would get in person on a Tuesday? We don't know the answer. I'm just raising questions of things to think about that, you know, I would not walk into the casino and put it on red or black on what we know just right now as to who prevails in those key battleground states.
Right, absolutely. And do we have any idea when this election could even possibly be called? I would say it's probably like early tomorrow morning at the late, like 5 a.m. at the latest. Some people say it could be the weekend.
Well, as I recall the last time, and I'll stand corrected if one of our viewers out there remembers better than I do, but I think it was Friday or Saturday before it was actually officially called. And but primarily because of Pennsylvania and a couple of other places, because it was so tight in Pennsylvania and even in Georgia. Remember, Biden took Georgia by just over 11,000 votes. So that is very tight. And anytime something is that close, you know, it's worthy of extra scrutiny to make sure, regardless of which side of the political fence you're on, they should be scrutinized carefully to make sure that they are accurate.
Right, absolutely.
Now, another thing here I might mention is I'm sort of surprised that former President Trump hasn't declared victory. Many people thought he would do so tonight to use that as an argument if things did not go his way. Mm-hmm. But we don't know yet if things are going to go his way or not.
The night is very much still young.
Is young.
That is for sure. I believe the former president has already alleged cheating in Philadelphia. I believe he tweeted that earlier.
No surprises.
Yes, exactly. Now in Minnesota, Minnesota is still 2% of those votes in. So yeah, very much so. That is, at this point, the night is still very much young. We are going to send it back over to the LNL's coverage of the presidential election, of course. But thank you all for watching, and we will be back momentarily. But of course, as always, thanks for watching.